Hello everyone, sorry it has taken me so long to find the time to do this video that I promised months ago now about what I think a new Farscape would look like. Now, if you are one of those people who, oh, I don't want a new Farscape, it's been fine the way it is, go away, leave.
But that door you're stuck to, it's detachable.
Take your cynicism someplace else. We're having fun here. We're going to speculate on what a new Farscape could look like. And I know the possibility that there will ever be a new Farscape do seem to be diminishing as the cycles go by, but hey, we live in hope. But before I start, big caveat, there's major spoilers here because Rockne and Brian both said years ago, yes I know, that any new Farscape, if it ever happens, is going to take into account what happened in the comic book series. A lot happened in the comic book series. A lot happened to our characters in the comic books. Remember, the comic books would have been the season 6 that Rockne had planned. There were the 4 seasons that were filmed. Season 5 was greatly condensed into the Peacekeeper Wars 2-part film. The comics, he has said, would have been the season 6. So I have to refer to things that happened in the comic books. I'm not going to give you a blow-by-blow, but major spoilers again. If you haven't read the comic books and still want to, stop this video right now. Go to my video on how to read the comic books, how to acquire the comic books, and read them. They're actually kind of fun, even though they're weird in so many ways. So yes, Rockne said that any future Farscape will be based upon the comics, the story arc of the comics. So where does that leave our characters? Well, we start at the beginning, of course. John Crichton. He is the centerpiece of Farscape. Or at least he has been. I'll get to that in a second. Some people complained that they didn't like that John Crichton, to them, seemed to no longer be the centerpiece of Farscape, and I think that's because they gave up on the comics a little too early. I know that the comics in the middle of its grand story arc did focus on Aeryn, but if they stuck with it, they would see that, yes, everything does come back to revolve around Crichton again. You have to remember that Crichton and Aeryn are a couple in every sense of the word now. They're almost one entity in the comics, and I think that is very important to keep in mind. Crichton, though, is, well, Crichton. Humans are superior, remember? And it is Crichton in the comics who puts the plan together with some help from others that eventually causes the Peacekeeper and other species alliance to defeat the main enemy in the comic book grand story arc. That would be the Kakor. It's only written down, so I don't know how it's pronounced, but I think it's Kakor, who are the evil force in the comic, and they dominate the last half to 2/3 of the comic book cycle, the season 6. They're defeated by Crichton's plan. Crichton's plan is, of course, typical Crichton. It's far-bought, but it's thinking outside the box that the aliens never think of, which of course is so much of Crichton's charm. So in the comics, his character is consistent. He is the weird outlier who comes in, kind of takes over even though he's not really trying to, and saves the day for everybody else. No doubt Crichton would be a major character in any future new Farscape. Probably not the central character, as I'll get into shortly here, but he's there. He's going to be there. And I'm sure Ben Browder would be happy to revive Crichton in any new series. Crichton is, of course, now married to Aeryn, and it's Aeryn who undergoes one of the most major changes of any character in the comic book story arc. To make a long story short, Aeryn tries to unravel a certain mystery, which I will talk about in a second here, and in so doing she discovers that the Peacekeepers have a very interesting past. We got a glimpse of this in the Peacekeeper Wars, where we learn that the Peacekeepers were basically genetically engineered or altered by the Eidolons many thousands of cycles ago. But when the Eidolons were put into that stasis by, we don't know who, but most likely by the Scarans, the Peacekeepers kind of lost their reason for being, and they lost their focus, as Yandalo explained.
Peacekeepers.
Apparently your forebears attempted to carry on, once we vanished. However, lacking our mediation abilities, they kept peace the only way they could. At the muzzle of a weapon.
And that's why they're hated.
We saw in the Peacekeeper Wars films that the Peacekeepers had hit a new low with, of course, Commandant Cleavage, Grayza. Grayza, of course, becomes even more corrupt, even more ridiculous in the comics. I won't get into that. And the reason I'm saying this is because it affects Aeryn. Aeryn discovers the Peacekeepers did have a guiding force, it's just that they lost it. And in her rediscovering of that, it sets in motion certain events that empower her to oust Grayza, who is selling out the Peacekeepers, and in so doing becomes elected the Commandant of the Peacekeepers herself, which no one saw coming, least of all Aeryn, and you could argue it doesn't entirely make a lot of sense. However, it is in the middle of a war. That Kakor War is happening by this point. So the generals within the Peacekeepers nominate Aeryn to be their commandant. She fulfills that role quite admirably because she is Aeryn Sun, she is a warrior, and she is a very good one. She also has now learned from Crichton compassion and patience and an intelligence that she really didn't have before. So in terms of our main characters here, Crichton is still there saving the universe, and Aeryn is now commandant of the Peacekeepers. They are still married, and they have this son, Dargo Sun Crichton, who they call Deke for short. And that name, I know some people don't like that he was called Deke, but that's what they're calling him, so his name is Deke. Deke has some sort of odd ability, as some sort of psychic ability that can manipulate time. This does fall into that way overdone science fiction trope of, oh, he's got a miraculous ability. But it is actually rather intriguingly explained in the comics. It's the mystery that Aeryn seeks to solve, what is going on with my son, and she does solve it to a point. Regardless, Deke, son of Crichton and Aeryn, has this ability to somehow manipulate time. I think this weirdly dovetails with that character of the ancients that Crichton calls Einstein. You may remember Einstein's conversation with Crichton about time. I don't know how far in the future Rockney's vision for the grand story arc went, and if there really is any connection between time as an issue and Deke having some sort of issue with time. Perhaps it's there, perhaps it's not. What we do know is that Rockney and Bryan have both said that any new series would pick up the story about 18 years later. And of course, that was a few years ago when it was 18 years after the end of Peacekeeper Wars. It's safe to say, though, that it will pick up with Deke as perhaps the central character. It, of course, makes perfect sense that all these years later, any revival of Farscape would be Farscape The Next Generation. It was, after all, 18 years between the end of Star Trek The Original Series and Star Trek The Next Generation. Farscape has obviously missed that time window, but again, we live in hope. So the revival would have its first family of Crichton, the human, Aeryn Sun, Commandant of the Peacekeepers, and Deke, who has this weird ability that no one yet understands. At the end of the comics, we know only that the three of them have survived. Deke is still an infant. We know that Peacekeeper children grow up very quickly, but beyond that, we really don't know what will happen. One rumor was that the new series would take place on Earth, but we don't know. I think it would be rather odd to rip the series out of the uncharted territories and bring it back to Earth. It was fun in Kansas and terra firma, but I think one of the distinctive features of Farscape that made it heads and shoulders above any other science fiction series is that it never descended back into the Earth is in peril from an alien force. I think they probably will keep it in the uncharted territories, one reason being that they really have a blank slate. The Kakor War, referred to in the comics as the War for the Uncharted Territories, wipes the slate clean. The sad reality is that the Kakor invasion wipes out the vast majority of sentient species in this sector of the galaxy. As we hear at the end of the comics, all the governments have been destroyed. Everything has been upended. If we do start up again 20 cycles later, the writers have a wonderful fresh canvas with which to work. They already have all the species that we know and love from the original series. But they literally could go with almost any direction with it all. We still have Crichton, we still have Aeryn, we have Deke, and the universe is their playground. 20 cycles of rebuilding, where does that leave us? Well, all kinds of ways. What do we have? Well, we have Rigel. In the comic books, Rigel does get his throne back briefly, but then the Core War happens and he loses it. He's still there at the end of the comics, and it's left open-ended what actually happens to him and what actually happens to Hyneria. For me, one of the best parts, one of the most entertaining and enlightening parts of the comic book story arc was the interaction between Rigel and Scorpius, who become very strange allies at a certain point in the story arc. Scorpius, of course, survives.
He survived. He always survives.
That's true.
And we learn so much about Scorpius in the comic book story arc. Of course, Scorpius's loyalties are highly questionable and variable, but we do get several very tantalizing hints that not only is there so much more to the story, Scorpius does have a continued alliance with Crichton. We aren't given details, it's just a hint of future action to come, because there is, at the very, very end of the comic book story arc of season 6, a flash forward to Deke telling us about a very small amount of what has happened in between. And that's one of the big hints that, no, Scorpius and Crichton continue to work together, not necessarily because Crichton wants to. Again, the blank canvas that the writers can work with here, Scorpius is still there. Rigel probably will go back to Hyneria. And it is unthinkable to not have Rigel as part of a new series, and it is utterly unthinkable to not have Scorpius be a part of this. We, of course, lost Zan, and there is no indication that they are going to bring back some sort of magical Deus Machina to bring Zan back to life. That leaves the other original character, Dargo. The last we see of him in Peacekeeper Wars is him fighting off the Scarans. But another tantalizing hint given to us by Deke is we never saw a body. Read into that what you will. The comic books give us no indication that Dargo did survive the final battle on Chiaga, but there is that hint. However, Anthony Simcoe, who played Dargo, seems to have hinted in the real world, in real life, that he's not interested in returning, which of course ends the issue right there. The idea of anyone else playing Dargo is pretty unimaginable. I do think they will bring Rigel back, and they have already shown that Rigel can be voiced by somebody else. I did a video about that a while back. What about Chiana? Chiana is the character that undergoes the second biggest transformation within the comic book story arc, second, of course, to Aeryn. Quite a few people did not like Chiana's transformation. I can certainly understand that. I do believe that Chiana's actions are consistent with her character. And I think some people don't get that because you have to pay really close attention to certain issues of the comic book series to get the backstory and kind of inner dialogue of Chiana to really understand what she's doing and why. Of course, what she's doing is she's run off with Roiin, again, Roiin, we don't know how that's pronounced because it's only in print. He, interestingly, is, on the one hand, an assassin hired to kill Deke by people we have no idea who they are. On the other hand, he is, Chiana says, Kreshta, which in Nabari society is kind of like soulmate, the absolute total love of her life. And he's obviously a little confused about this at first, but he does kind of realize that something is going on here. And so Chiana is now with Roiin, however his name is pronounced. We also get another hint in the comic books that he becomes a part of the action, that he has future interactions with Crichton. What exactly that is, we don't know, but obviously he's going to stick around. Chiana doesn't exactly have divided loyalties, and we absolutely do not know yet what happens to the contract that Roiin had to kill Deke. We know that he lost touch with his client because, of course, that sector of the galaxy is almost completely wiped out by the Kokor. So maybe that reason for him, as he says, if I'm not getting paid, I don't have a reason to kill. It's nothing personal. Nice guy. And so maybe that's just off the cards. And he can just be lovey-dovey with Chiana and join the group on Moya. And yes, Moya. It's always about Moya. You can say Crichton's the central character of Farscape, but no, Moya is the central character of Farscape because it always comes back to Moya. And Moya, of course, is home. And it's really impossible to imagine Farscape taking place anywhere else but on board Moya. Moya is home. And of course, you get Moya, you get Pilot. We learn a lot about Pilot, and we learn a lot about Pilot's species in the comic book. Scorpius learning about Chiana, learning about Pilot are reasons enough to read the comic books. Again, I think that if they are going to bring the series back, it's going to be we're in the uncharted territories, we're 20 cycles later, we're on board Moya, we have Crichton, Aeryn, and Deke. Rigel's probably back in Hyneria, but he's going to make an appearance, you just know it. Scorpius is out there. What exactly he's doing, we don't know. Chiana is out there with Loverboy, and where she is and doing whatever she is, we don't know. But again, this is where you can start to play with these dynamics and have a lot of fun in a future series. I do here have to give away that we lose Sikozu, Jothi, and Naranti. They're all killed in the war, each one of them nobly sacrificing themselves to save others. That's all I will say. We also know that Braca survives, so he is still out there on a possibility for a new series, and the actor has been open to that. In the past, he's expressed openness to returning. There's a mention that Grunschlick has survived the war also, and that actor has unfortunately left us, but if you have a diagnosis, you have to have Grunschlick, apparently. So if we do have a diagnosis, we will have probably someone new playing Grunschlick. We also still have Stark. He has some of his abilities. He seems to have lost some of them. We learned that at the end of Peacekeeper Wars. But toward the end of the comic book series, he still has some ability to spiritually connect people that we saw him do throughout the series and in Peacekeeper Wars. I won't give too much away again with the comics, but there are a number of characters that cycle in and some that cycle out in the comic books. And so there's a willingness to bring in new characters, and I think we would definitely see that in any new series, that we would have some new characters, we would have some new possibilities to play with. And if God is willing, there is another Farscape series. It really is kind of exciting because you do have a whole universe. You do have a set of characters, you do have a set of species, you have a lot that's been laid down as a foundation for what Rockne and any other writers involved in a new series could go with. They really do have a blank canvas. And I would think that they would do a better job of taking up on that than Star Trek Voyager, which was kind of the end of Star Trek for me, because when Star Trek Voyager came out, I was kind of interested, and I thought, wow, okay, so they're going to be in the other side of the galaxy, so you can have new plots and new characters and new everything. And no, it was just the same old recycled plots. They kept bringing in these characters that should not even be there. And I don't think Farscape would do that. I don't think Brian Henson or Rockne O'Bannon would ever allow such a thing to be. I think that we would really have some innovative and creative new things. What that would be, I don't know. I think it will center on Deke. I think it will center on his ability, whatever this is. And they'll have to come up with a new threat because, as I said in one other video, you need conflict. You cannot have something that is fictional without there being conflict. So what the conflict would be, we don't know. It's possible that there's still a desire from someone somewhere, somehow, to eliminate Deke. And it was never revealed what that was, who that was, why that was. So that still may be out there. We don't know. They could come up with a new enemy, come up with a new species. They could just revive some sort of conflict within the Peacekeepers. Who knows? I'd like to see it because, yes, absolutely, Farscape was the most creative, the most fun science fiction series ever, ever, ever. I do want to see what's more because I know that Rockne had more in mind, and I'd like to hear what that is. I'd love to hear your thoughts too. What do you think? What do you want to see in a new series, if it happens? Let me know. Comment below. Give me a video response. But let's keep the community alive. Remember, I am the only Farscape channel now. The Farscape official channel is no more. It's been taken down by the Henson Company. They do show some videos on their main page, but they're more interested in the kids' shows now, which may be why we will never get a new Farscape, because the Henson Company is busy doing kids' shows, which more power to them. But I'd love to get Farscape back and love to hear from you.